You've been in this moment before. Not in the gym, in an argument, or a meeting, or a car. Alone, after someone said something you didn't expect, and your body did the exact same thing it does at mile 18 of a race you're not sure you can finish. Chest tight, jaw locked, something hot moving up from your gut, and that single, very loud impulse: quit, react, get out of this. Most people deal with that impulse by trying to think their way through it. Therapy, journaling, breathing exercises, and those things have their place, but there is a different approach, one that nobody in the wellness space talks about clearly enough, and it starts not in your mind but in your legs, in your lungs, in the specific, searing moment when your body is telling you it's done and you choose to keep moving anyway. What I'm going to walk you through is the actual neuroscience of why physical endurance is the most underrated training ground for emotional self-regulation that exists, and I'll show you exactly how to use it. Not as a metaphor, but as a system. Stay with me through the first chapter, because the lie your brain tells you during a hard run is the exact same lie it tells you right before you lose your composure. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. In the 1990s, a South African sports scientist named Tim Noakes proposed something that the athletic world didn't want to hear. He said that physical exhaustion, the feeling of being completely done, the moment your legs stop and your lungs burn and your body says no more, is not a mechanical failure. It is a decision made by your brain. Before your body is actually out of fuel. He called it the central governor theory. The basic idea: your brain monitors your physiological reserves in real time, and when it calculates that you are approaching a threshold it considers dangerous, it sends the signal to stop, not because you've hit the wall, but because it wants to make sure you never do. It is protecting you. It is also lying to you. Studies run on elite athletes confirm this. Subjects who believed they were in the final sprint of a race and were told to give everything consistently produced more power than subjects who didn't know how close the finish was. Same legs, same lungs, same glycogen stores, different output, because the brain, once it understood the finish was near and survival was not at risk, released the governor. Here is where it gets relevant to everything that isn't running. The central governor doesn't only manage physical output, it manages emotional output too. That tightening in your chest when a conversation goes sideways, that heat behind your eyes when someone crosses a line. That is your amygdala doing exactly what the central governor does during a hard run. It is pulling the brake. It is telling you, react now, protect yourself, this is dangerous. And just like with the running, the signal comes early, before you have actually run out of composure, before the situation has actually crossed the line. The alarm fires on prediction, not on fact. Your body cannot tell the difference between physical threat and emotional threat. It uses the same hardware for both, which means if you can learn to sit inside physical discomfort without reacting, really, sit in it deliberately, repeatedly, you are training the exact neural pathway that governs your emotional response under pressure. The Stoics understood this intuitively, without fMRI data. Epictetus, who was a slave, who had no control over his physical circumstances whatsoever, built an entire practice around one idea. The only thing that is truly yours is how you respond to what happens to you, not the event, the response. What Noakes gave us 2,000 years later is the biology of why that practice works. The gap between stimulus and response is not a philosophical concept. It is a neural space, and you can train it to be wider. Physical endurance is how you do that training. I want you to think about a specific moment, not a concept, a moment. You are in the final set. The weight is heavier than it should be at this point in the session. Your form is holding, but everything else is giving out. The forearms burning, the breath coming short. the mental count getting slower. And at rep 7, your brain sends the message clearly, put it down, you're done, this is enough. That message is not weakness, it is hardware. It is the central governor doing its job. Rep 8 is where the work actually starts, not the physical work that was happening from rep 1. The psychological work, the practice of observing the impulse to stop and choosing deliberately not to act on it yet. That gap between the impulse and the action is the laboratory, and every single rep you push through inside that gap is a rep of emotional regulation. Not a metaphor for it, the actual thing. High-intensity training and heavy lifting work as emotional laboratories because they are controlled environments for one of the most difficult human experiences, voluntary suffering with a clear purpose. You chose to be here. You chose the weight. The discomfort is not happening to you. You walk toward it. And that distinction changes everything about how your nervous system learns to process it. Compare this to the emotional flashpoint. The moment in a difficult conversation when the heat rises and the impulse fires. In that moment, the suffering feels involuntary. It is happening to you. Your nervous system treats it as an attack, not a choice, and it responds accordingly. Fight, flee, freeze. But if you have spent months, rep after rep, interval after interval, sitting inside voluntary discomfort without reacting, your nervous system has been building a different default response. Not suppression, not denial. Something more precise, the ability to observe the sensation without immediately becoming it. The searing heat in your quads at mile 4 is the same signal as the heat of anger at minute 4 of a bad argument. Your brain processes them through the same relay. Train one, you train both. There is a specific practice that accelerates this. During a high-intensity interval, at the exact moment the discomfort peaks, you label it, not out loud necessarily, but internally. This is heat. This is breathlessness. This is the impulse to stop. You name the physical sensation without evaluating it, without deciding it's good or bad, without acting on it. Neuroscientists call this affect labeling. UCLA researchers found it measurably reduces amygdala activation, meaning the alarm quiets, when you name it. What you are doing in the gym, if you practice this deliberately, is building a reflex. The reflex of naming before reacting. And that reflex will show up in the boardroom, in the argument, in the car, everywhere the heat rises, without you having to think about it, because it's not a thought anymore, it's a trained response. Here is what is actually happening inside your skull when you push through a hard physical session. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for judgment, planning, and emotional regulation, is in a direct tug-of-war with your amygdala. The amygdala fires the alarm. Stop. This is dangerous. React now. The prefrontal cortex processes that alarm and decides whether to act on it or override it. Under light or moderate physical load, the prefrontal cortex handles this without much effort. But under extreme load, the kind that comes from a real interval session or a max effort lift, the amygdala signal is louder, and the override requires genuine effort. You are doing cognitive work at the same time as physical work. And that cognitive-physical overlap is where the rewiring happens. Repeated exposure to this, choosing to override the stop signal under real physiological stress, physically strengthens the neural pathways between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. The connection gets faster. The override gets easier, not just in the gym, everywhere. Stanford neuroscientist Andrew Huberman has described this as building top-down control, the brain's capacity to modulate its own alarm systems. Most people think this control either exists or it doesn't, that some people are just naturally calmer under pressure. The data says otherwise. It is a trainable capacity. And the most efficient training environment is one that combines high physiological arousal with a conscious decision to remain non-reactive. In other words, the gym done right is a neurology lab. There is a specific state that experienced endurance athletes describe after a genuinely hard session. Not the post-workout high, that's dopamine, and endorphins, real but temporary. Something quieter than that. A kind of clarity that sits underneath the physical exhaustion, an absence of urgency, a sense that the things that seemed important before the run have lost some of their grip. That state is not a side effect of exercise. It is a direct result of the prefrontal cortex having just spent an extended period overriding the amygdala's signals. The alarm system is quieter because it was just tested and survived. The regulatory muscle is warm, and in that warm post-override state, you have access to a quality of thinking that is genuinely difficult to reach any other way. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations almost certainly after physical exertion. He was a Roman emperor who trained with soldiers. The physical discipline was not separate from the philosophical discipline. It was the same discipline applied to different material. You are not going to the gym to look a certain way. You are going to build the capacity to be a certain kind of person. The physique is a side effect. The rewiring is the point. Let me give you the actual practice, not the concept, the specific things you do during a session to turn it into emotional training. The first is breath-based labeling. During the hardest interval of your session, not the warm-up, not the moderate effort, the hardest one, you observe your breathing without trying to control it. You notice it is shallow, you notice the urge to gasp, and you label it breathlessness, impulse to stop. That's it, no action, just the label. This trains the observe before react sequence in a high arousal state. Your nervous system learns that sensation does not automatically equal action. The gap opens, and every time you do this, every session, every hard interval, the gap gets slightly wider. The second practice is complaint suppression. During a grueling session, the last mile, the final set, the moment when every reasonable person would slow down or stop, you enforce a strict internal silence. No self-talk about how hard it is, no bargaining, no just one more and I'll stop. You simply don't engage with the commentary. This is directly transferable. The urge to complain during a workout is structurally identical to the urge to respond defensively in a verbal confrontation. Both are the amygdala trying to discharge discomfort through vocalization. Train yourself not to discharge it in the gym, and the reflex weakens everywhere else, too. It is not about being tough. It is about recognizing that the commentary is optional. The sensation is real. The narrative about the sensation is constructed. You can have the sensation without the narrative. Practiced enough, that separation becomes automatic. The third practice is the crisis reframe. At the physical wall, the exact moment your body presents the clearest possible argument for stopping, you consciously reframe the situation as a high-stakes interpersonal moment. You ask, if this were an argument I needed to stay calm in, what would I do right now? The answer is always the same. Breathe, observe, don't react, keep moving. So that's what you do. You breathe, you observe, you don't react to the impulse, you keep moving. And your brain, which cannot distinguish between this is a hard run and this is a difficult conversation at the level of the nervous system, your brain logs this as practice, as evidence that the stop signal can be observed without being obeyed, as proof, written in biology, that you are the kind of person who does not flinch at the flashpoint. Every physical wall you walk through is a mock-up of a life crisis. The gym is not preparation for real life. It is real life compressed into a controlled environment where you get to practice the response you want to have when the stakes are higher. The boardroom version of this, the relationship version, the 2 a.m. crisis version, they all run on the same hardware. The question is whether that hardware has been trained or left to its factory settings. Factory settings react. trained hardware responds. Here is the framework, not a 5-day challenge, not a 30-day program. A permanent integration of endurance-based emotional training into how you move through the world. 3 sessions per week of deliberate high-intensity work, not necessarily long. 40 minutes is sufficient if the intensity is real. The criteria is not duration. The criteria is that you reach the moment where the central governor fires, where your body genuinely argues for stopping, and you stay there for at least 2 to 5 minutes before pulling back. That window is the training window. Everything before it is warm-up. During those 2 to 5 minutes, you practice one of the 3 techniques from Chapter 4. Breath-based labeling, complaint suppression, crisis reframe. You don't need all 3 in one session. 1. Practiced consistently will produce measurable change in 8 to 12 weeks. The long-term effect of this is not what most people expect. It is not that you stop feeling things. It is not that the anger disappears or the anxiety goes quiet or the pain stops registering. What changes is the relationship between what you feel and what you do. The sensation arrives, the heat, the tightness, the impulse, and there is a pause before you act on it that wasn't there before. That pause is not passive. It is not numbness. It is a fully awake, fully present moment of choice. You feel everything, and you choose what to do with it. That is what Epictetus was describing. That is what Marcus Aurelius was practicing in his journal entries, written after days of governing an empire in constant crisis. Not the absence of difficulty, the presence of a trained self inside the difficulty. The ego that has been tested physically, that has been to the wall repeatedly, voluntarily, and has chosen not to stop, is a different ego than the one running on factory settings. Not louder, not more aggressive, quieter, actually, because it has nothing left to prove to itself. It has already made the choice, many times in conditions where nobody was watching and nothing was at stake except its own standard. That ego does not snap under pressure. It does not react to every provocation. It does not need to win every exchange, because it is not keeping score the same way anymore. The strongest version of you is not built in the moments that were easy. It is built in the ones where you chose not to stop. In the gym, in the conversation, in the long, hard stretch of a year that tried everything it could think of to make you react. If this landed for you, if any part of the last hour shifted something, the next video goes deeper on the neuroscience of emotional regulation under stress. Specifically what happens in the 48 hours after a major emotional trigger, and why the response window is longer than most people think. That one's already up. In 1996, Rosie Ruiz crossed the finish line of the Boston Marathon in record time. She looked fresh, barely sweating. No signs of the physical deterioration you'd expect from 26.2 miles of hard effort. The crowd cheered. Officials placed a laurel wreath on her head. She had taken the subway for most of the race. I'm not telling you that story to make a point about cheating. I'm telling it because of what happened to the other runners. The ones who had actually been on the course for 4 hours, who had gone through every stage of real exhaustion, who had heard their bodies argue for stopping at mile 18 and kept moving anyway. Those runners knew something Rosie Ruiz didn't. Not a philosophical insight, a biological one. They knew what the central governor actually feels like from the inside. And, more importantly, they knew it was lying. Tim Noakes was a South African sports scientist who spent decades trying to understand why athletes stop when they do. Not why they get injured. Not why their muscles mechanically fail. Why they stop, willingly, by choice, before either of those things actually happens. What he found, after reviewing decades of performance data and running his own studies, was uncomfortable. The point of perceived exhaustion, the moment when everything in you says this is it. I am done, does not correspond to any objective measure of physiological depletion. Your muscles still have glycogen. Your heart rate, while elevated, is within sustainable range. Your core temperature hasn't hit the danger threshold. The body isn't empty. The brain just decided it was getting close enough to empty that stopping was the safer bet. He called it the central governor, a predictive regulatory system in the brain that monitors physiological reserves and sends the stop signal, not when you've run out of fuel, but when it calculates that continuing at the current rate will eventually endanger survival. It fires early, it fires conservatively, and it fires with such authority that most people never question it.